and welcome to Kal-bardr's Corner for this series finale. Yes, folks, this is the final episode of What Makes a Knight. I am Lord Kal-bardr Gellir, Companion of the Meridian Cross, Companion of the Argent Comet, Companion of the Argent Lamp, Companion of the Falcon's Faith, and Reaper, coming to you live, as always, from the Barony of the Osprey on the southern coast of Meridies. Now, for this series, I am joined by an absolute SCA legend, and in this episode, we may just hear some of the origins of that legend story. You may know it from SCA Coach's Corner or from the fighting fields of Artemisia and the known world. This is Duke Sean Kirkpatrick Tarragon. Good evening, Your Grace.
Good evening, Cal, and thanks again for having me and for hosting this series. It has been a lot of fun, and I appreciate the viewers tuning in every couple of weeks to hear what I have to say about a topic that I'm somewhat passionate about. I am Duke Sir Sean Kirkpatrick Tarragon. I've been a knight for 34 years, coming up soon. I have 7 of my former squires who have been added to the Order of Chivalry. And I have seen the evolution of the order, certainly in the Kingdom of Artemisia for its entirety, and a pretty good portion of Aidenveld as well. And tonight I am very honored to have the man who started it all for me, my knight, and my friend, Duke Brion Anthony Uriel Tarragon, currently of the East Kingdom and parts east, originally from the Kingdom of Artemisia, Principality, or Kingdom of Aidenveld, and Principality of Artemisia. So, Brion, thank you again for joining us. Be kind enough to introduce yourself.
Yeah, happy to be here, Sean, and everybody. Yes. Well, thanks for the invitation. So I'm Brion Tarragon. I've had the pleasure of being in the society for many, many years, and having witnessed a lot of really, really grand tournaments and wonderful folks taking their fighting skills and their passions and turning them into things that inspire others. So I don't know what else I can say.
Well, Sean has definitely talked a lot about you. All good things, I promise. I wouldn't let him say anything bad about you, Your Grace.
That's right.
I'm hoping you'll tell us some of the bad stuff about him tonight, though. Trying to tone down the grandiose, I guess that is the Shawn, the Duke Shawn that we all know.
Well, Cal also always introduces me as this legend, and that's always been it's always been kind of sketchy for me, having been raised by an actual legend.
Right.
So I'm the diluted version, I assure you.
I think it's like legends beget legends, right?
Is that what it is?
You have to make new ones. There you go. All right, so we this is now, I think, episode 11. I think is the count. Or
I think so. Yep, episode 11. Yeah.
We planned 8, and we're on 11 now, and this is our ending. But I think this is a really great topic to end on. The idea of, well, I got this shiny new white belt. I've got these cool spurs. What do I do now? What's tomorrow, right? And I think there's a lot to look into there of the idea of what's the immediate thing, what's the immediate tomorrow look like, and then what's the rest of your career look like. So, Sean, what is your driving for this topic?
Yeah, so when I was thinking about this, I've run into so many people once they achieve the accolade. There's, when you are unbelted, whether you're a squire, whether you're freelance, there is this one very common goal, that we're all shooting for, and that is to be knighted, right? And it's, and I always tell my squires that there is so much more beyond knighthood once you achieve that, and they understand that there's more that you could do afterwards. But we all have this very common milestone that we all look at, and there's this single-minded focus towards driving towards that one milestone. But then when you hit that, and it's something that is very clearly defined, right? And as we've spent 11 episodes defining what that is, right? It's this very clear definition of what that is and where it is and what it looks like. And then after that, I just see so many people, once they get knighted, that kind of get lost in the enormity of all the possibilities after that, right? You even if you just think about just becoming a better fighter, well, what does that mean? How good is good? Do I do I enter crown? Do I try to win crown? Do I, go to Outlands prize tourney and compete in that and some of these other, big international tournaments? Do I pursue my arts, or do I continue doing more service, or what have you? And there's just so many things that you can do, but I think people kind of get caught up in all the possibilities, and without having that very clear direction, I think a lot of people get lost, and that's kind of why I came up with this particular episode. And also, finally getting knighted, right? We've been talking about all the things that we need to do that, and like finally here we are. And it's achieving the accolade changes your perspective for sure. I don't want to say it necessarily changes you, but it changes your place in the SCA, because now you are in a position of leadership, and it changes how you see things. It does change how people see you, and that's not necessarily your fault, but it is kind of your problem. And your role changes, and what do you do with that? And some people don't really have that direction. So that's kind of why I came up with this particular one.
Yeah, I'd add in, I think the big thing is it's so important, this whole concept of passing it along. The SCA for all of us, somebody posted out, some folks remember when I was a young pup. Well, we all were young pups.
Right.
Aside from a few of the core founding members of the society, everybody who has gone on this adventure has started as a newcomer and has progressed through a series of actions and things that they've done to build and become whatever it was they chose to kind of pursue. So the core thing that I've always loved about the group was this whole concept of passing along the knowledge, whether it's teaching somebody how to build armor, teaching somebody how to hold a sword, teaching somebody how to do heraldry, teaching somebody how to just participate in the group. All of those actions, it's a key aspect of the responsibility that you have as a knight. And I think that's the one thing that I think everybody gets that, but sometimes it's really a question of what are you really doing with it, and what have you done with it? Because in giving the accolade to somebody, part of that is you're handing them the responsibility to then pass it along. Take this and now share this knowledge, share this information, but also be a really good example for everybody else. And that's something I've always really taken very true to heart. When I kind of thought about what it is to be a knight and what I wanted people to see, that's what I try to recreate, at least for me and my persona and what I'm doing when I participate. Because I think it's a real important part of sharing and creating this so that every newcomer that comes in sees something pretty magical, and that they then can take it and develop it, and someday they can pass it along as well.
Yeah, and I'd say right along those lines, when I had the first of my squires knighted, I had Timur and Tirlock were knighted 2 months apart or thereabouts, and as soon as they got knighted, I felt good, proud papa moment. But even as that was happening, the thought for me instantly turned to, okay, so I've taught these guys well enough for them to be knighted, but did I teach them well enough for them to teach somebody else? So as greedy as it may seem, as soon as my guys got knighted, I'm like, I want some grandbabies. It's like, show me that I taught you well enough for you. As Brian said, the legacy of the Order of Chivalry goes back to the first days of the society, and we have an obligation to pass that along. So I know for me, in that instance, once I had those couple of my guys knighted, I'm like, show me that I taught you well enough for you to pass this on. And both of those guys have had squires of their own who have been knighted, and I've been very fortunate to have 6 of my grand squires who have been added to Chivalry as well. And it's Yeah, like that's what Brian was saying is like but you got to pass it along, and you have to pass it on strong enough that it can continue, and that legacy and that connection to the first days of the society can be maintained.
Right. So it's funny. You actually sort of made an odd distinction there. So like you felt like they were good enough to get knighted, and what I think and what I heard was, but are they good enough to be knights? Right, which is then can they pass it on? Right, those are sort of two different things, and that's really odd to think about. But you're right. Yeah. Like, okay, cool, you got there, you met the mark, but can you do the next step now?
Yeah. Well, and I know for me, and this is something we've talked about from the first episode. Brian never asked me to do something for the sake of getting knighted, right? And this has been the tagline from the show: do knightly things. Brian taught me that there are things there, like knights do knightly things, and you're doing these things because they are knightly things to do, right? And when we talked about the franchise episode, it took me a long time, because I was doing things because they're knightly things to do, but the franchise to me was the difference between doing the things the knights do and being a knight. And it took me a while. It was actually after I got out of the military before I finally set that quest upon myself to say, what does it mean to me to be a knight rather than just doing these things that my knight taught me are knightly things to do? And that was a process for me that I had to work through. It was like, what does it mean to be a knight? And I think that's part of getting lost in it, right? We do these things because we're taught by our mentors to do these things, but there's that sense of there's a bit of sense of ownership that like, how do I make knighthood like my franchise? Like, that's why it's called that, right? How do I make this my thing instead of a copy of Brian's thing, right?
Well, it's going to be a copy of his thing, right? It's going to be, but it's going to be a copy. Then you take that crayon and you add some things here, and you add a little hair over there, and you add a tree in the background. You make it your thing, but you should still see the foundations of what you were taught from Brian, and from his knights before him, right?
Yeah, boy howdy. And I think that's something that you can definitely see in Brian's entire lineage. You can see Brian's fingerprints and DNA, and you can see Robert Dispenser's influence in that as well. And that's something I'm very proud of, at least for my part of that lineage.
Yeah, I'd also add, I think sometimes the whole lineage is very cool and something that you look back on and you go, oh, this is really, it's very, very neat. But I got to tell you, along the way, I've had so many mentors from all of the branches within the society and all of the different peerages, and many a knight that I looked up to who wasn't my knight, but they were teachers, they were mentors, they were people who I could actually learn from. And I think that that's another aspect of what helps build you into whatever what you're going to become, because you're going to see things. I mean, there's stuff that my knight, Sir Robert Dispenser, did and could do that was so unique to him. I could try to emulate it, but it's not going to be something I can do, not successfully. But I can learn from that, and I can say, okay, how can I take what he's emulating and showing and striving to do, and work that into what I'm trying to become and evolving to. And I think that's another important part, because there's a question somebody's asking about, is it important to have squires as a knight? And I think that squiring is an interesting concept, and I know you probably have covered this in your other episodes, but
last episode.
Yeah. So, but I also think that sometimes the social aspects of squiredom is probably the biggest driving factor, because people oftentimes squire to people they want to hang out with, they want to be around, they want to, enjoy, party with, live with. I mean, these are people that you're going to spend a lot of time with. They're usually very good friends. I don't know anybody who becomes a squire to someone who doesn't have a friendship that's a deep friendship that develops over the years. So, but that doesn't mean that's where there's an aspect of the social part of that is very, very important, and the arrangements that go with that. The training aspects are continuous, and they come from all angles and not just from that. So I think that when you become a knight and you decide to take on squires, and Shawn could tell you this, I've every squire that I had that became a knight, one of the things that I told them during their knighthood or right after their knighthood ceremony was, take a breath. Don't feel this need to immediately go take on squires, because you got to figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and what this new position means before you start deciding how you're going to influence others on all of that. And quite frankly, there isn't, it's not a race. It's not something that you need to do. And some people take it like that. I mean, early in the society, one of the things I was always a little bit amazed by were there were certain knights who were just out grabbing squires,
making a fan club.
Yeah. How many people can I get, people a few weeks into the society and asking, hey, you want to be my squire? It's not about that. And it's very, very different. So I think that, having really good relationships and stuff develop over time, then they become very strong, and they can, and they'll lead to many other things.
So actually, to follow up on that, because we've had a couple questions about squires. So last episode we focused on the squire side, right? The do you become a squire? Is it necessary? So with this, we're talking about you're knighted now. What's next? So taking squires. So the other half of this conversation. So the couple of questions we've had come in. Actually, we'll start with this one from Ask the Knights Live, Baron Logan Path Warden. How long after becoming a knight should you wait to take squires? So I know a lot of times there's the conversation of, the year and the day, or you wait a year, right? And that's a very popular thing here in Meridia's, where they suggest the knights wait a year before they take a squire. Let them sort of settle into their knighthood. So what are the thoughts on that?
I think Brion's not exactly typical on this.
Right.
I think that the problem with a lot of that is it's completely personal, and it depends on what you've got going on in your life. I mean, one of the things I had the advantage of when I started in the SCA was I was young. And being young, I put a tremendous amount of time into participating and playing SCA. In fact, that's all I did for a big chunk of my life early on when I was young. But it was because I had the time to. I could play SCA 24/7. Right. A lot of folks don't have that option. It's not something that you can do. You've got, job, career, family, all these other things that might be actually causing you to need to put some time other ways. So I don't think there's a magic answer to that question. I think it's more of a concept of being ready for because when you take on a squire, you take on a responsibility. And so as a knight, as a next thing to do, that's something that you have to weigh in. I'd say the other thing you have to think about is, and this kind of gets down to, what is it you're in the society for? What is it you're trying to do, and what is it that really gets you excited and really creates passion for you? Because there are so many things to do in the society. I remember, years and years ago, I remember thinking, how could you ever get tired of the various things that are out there that are available to you? And it's because there's a multitude of arts and sciences and other things you can pursue that are all connected to all of this. And that's not even talking about trying to make your fighting better over time to continue to climb that ladder. So I think some of this has to do with figuring out for yourself, what is it that's really going to be your passion or the thing you're going to focus on, and how does that work? And then how does that work with having squires? Right. Because you may find that you don't have the time to really put into that piece of it because you're pursuing other things for a while. And once again, there's no magic to it. I mean, being a knight, you don't have to take on a squire. You want to be able to share your knowledge and share what you know. And I think that's almost more important.
Yeah. And, I had started my, original stick mechanics pelwork training with a gentleman by the name of Lord Brion Tarragon. So I've been working with Brion for about a year and a half before he got knighted, and you know, and it was pretty clear that he was on the up and up, and that he was going to be recognized, you know, in short order anyway. So, but yeah, I've been working with him for about a year and a half prior to that, and so Brion got knighted at at Aidenville Crown in October '94. And then he made me a squire at our solstice court in December. You know, so 3 months later,
84.
and yeah, in 84, sorry. And at the time, I had not yet set foot on the fighting field. We were still putting my armor together. I'd been doing pel work for more than a year, but I hadn't fought at all at that time. So, I mean, it was a pretty big leap of faith on his part to take his first squire. And I was never a man at arms. Just, you know, day one made me a squire. That's something that just doesn't happen anymore. And I see that Thorne out in the East had asked a question about the man at arms as well. So that's something that I do now. Yeah, so I was never a man at arms. I just went right to a squire before I ever set foot on the fighting field. And so it was like gets knighted in October, takes a squire in December, and then wins the next crown, you know, in March. And you know, it went that fast. So as far as how long you should wait, well, you know, we'd already had that relationship for more than a year.
Right.
You know, and just kind of waiting for the order to recognize his standing. And so we already had that relationship. Right. And on the other side of that, shortly after I got knighted, I went in the military, and you know, we talked about this when Havork was on, because I worked with Havork when we were on Guam together, and I didn't take any squires while I was in the military because I didn't feel comfortable with the idea of I'm going to take somebody and then I'm going to be moving somewhere else in another 2 years or less, and so I just didn't feel like it was fair to that relationship to I just didn't feel like I could have that bond that we expect. You know, because, you know, something I haven't really talked about a lot on this show is that the Night Squire relationship that I had with Brion is, and I hope not to embarrass him too much with this, but it is very sacred to me. His mentorship came at a very critical time in my life. He became the positive male role model that I needed, and it was very, very special to me. And I've been very fortunate to have a similar bond in relationship with my squires as well. Right. And I just never felt like I could do that while I was in the military. It just felt like, you know, like I would be kind of abandoning somebody when I went off to another thing. So I didn't take any squires while I was in the military, you know. And since then I've had squires that have, you know, moved to other kingdoms or been, you know, distance relationships. And, you know, with the power of the interwebs now, I mean, there's no distance too great. And I think we covered that in the last episode as well, that like it is so much easier for me to work with somebody at a greater distance, that I don't have that concern as much as to, am I going to be able to serve them and do them justice and to get them across the finish line, as it were. But so his choice to take me as a squire early on was based on our relationship, and my choice to not take squires for a long time. I mean, it was probably 8 years before I took my first squire, was based on you know, my circumstances, right? So yeah, there's no magic answer. I know people like to wait a year and a day. I know some knights like to wait a year. You know, Anton took Ozer as a squire the day he got knighted. You know, you already have that relationship. There's no one answer for that.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's really the important part. So essentially, you know, to remove the titles, like you guys were already in that relationship. You were already sort of serving in a man at arms squire knight relationship, even though it wasn't. Right. There were no belts, there were no official regalia. That's what you were doing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure Anton has the same thing with Ozer. I'm sure I can speak from my peer. She took her first protege literally in the parking lot, leaving her elevation. But they had been together and having that conversation for 2 years prior. And she said, hey, when you become a Pelican, I'm going to be your protege. And that was a conversation they already had. So it was, I think that they were already on that path to that at that point. So I think the idea of waiting a year or waiting 6 months or waiting whatever is I think important to think on in the, you don't have to do it immediately, right? It's like, I don't have to show that I'm the biggest, baddest knight in the room because I've got 30 squires now, and on day 2. I think that's the idea. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to build those relationships and build the community and sort of and learn to teach that. And I can think of the idea that I now can do that, and you want to do it fast because it's like a thing you can't, like you couldn't do it yesterday, now you can do it today, so you want to do it immediately, right?
Well, I'd also throw in there, I think another important aspect is, do you have time as a knight to give to your squires what is necessary for them to be able to get to where they're trying to go?
Right.
And this is where the ego and all the other stuff has to kind of really be put to the side, because that relationship is very, very important, because when you sign on for that as a squire, you have a certain level of expectation on what you're trying to achieve and where you want to go. And as the knight in that relationship, you've got to actually be willing to actually have the follow through to actually do what is necessary and be part of that whole thing to make it successful over time. And that could mean that, for some person, they may have the time to have 20 squires,
right,
and give all those 20 squires the attention they need and show them that, help them and follow through on all those oaths that they take. Other relationships, one may be enough. I mean, it may be that you have one friend who you are coaching and helping through this process, and that is going to take up all your time. And there's nothing wrong with that either. That's actually probably a better thing, because I do think that there is a lot to pass on, and there's a lot, but it's just not in the SCA. I don't know a single squire that I've had that the relationship didn't go outside of the SCA to their personal life and other things, that you've got to have the time and energy and willingness to be part of that. Because if you're not, you're missing a big part of the whole arrangement. So I think that's an important aspect for a knight to kind of take into consideration. It's not just for that couple of hours that you're at an event together.
Yeah. And, along those lines, my squire brother, Duke Thorfinn, just commenting in there that, Thorfinn only took one squire at a time. And that was his thing. And I remember when, as I recall if I recall correctly, and Thorfinn will correct me on this, but I think Duke Floki was wanted to be a squire or a man at arms, and Thorfinn kind of had to tell him, you have to wait until this other guy gets knighted. But he took one at a time so that he could focus on just the one, and that worked. He had Sickman and Basil and Floki that were all knighted. Just one at a time. It's like, as soon as I get done with this one, then we'll make the man at arms the squire and see how that goes. And that's not for everybody, but that clearly worked for him.
Right.
And Brian was talking about knowing these people outside of the SCA as well too. I mean, at some level, you need to know that the person you're going to have, that knight squire relationship is sacred. It is very special. And you want to know whether or not somebody is a garbage human on, from Monday through Friday. You want to know what these people are actually like. And a lot of my knight squire relationships with my squires is started off as kind of a student teacher role, but all of them have turned into deep personal lifetime friendships. And and I could always tell when one of my guys was ready to get knighted when they started counseling me on certain aspects of the SCA, because that was a signal to me that they understood enough about the society and how things work that they were able to give me good solid counsel on things. And that often happened, sometime before they were recognized as knights. It starts off as a student teacher role, and eventually, one of the things that I may have mentioned on the series before is, I will always be Brion's squire, right? He will always be my knight, and my squires will now that they are knighted, will forever be my brothers. They are my brothers. They're my equals. But to most of them, they will always be my squires.
Right.
You know, there's a certain relationship that you build in that time where it's like, Brion's my knight, and I will always be his squire.
And that's the same for me. I mean, I've always thought of Robert as my knight, and I will always think of him that way. So I think that has a lot to do with the whole service side of the whole arrangement and what you're trying to do. So now somebody asked a question. I think it was Thorne asked a question about being a man at arms. The one comment I'd make about the man at arms aspect is just realize there's a lot of different definitions of man at arms and what that means. I started, and it was because I saw a couple of other knights that I thought were doing it this way in a way that worked. I started actually incorporating men at arms. And the way I did it was I defined being a squire as a commitment to pursuing knighthood. And being a man at arms was a person seeking to serve and learn fighting and basically make the decision on, at some point, do they want to be a squire?
Right.
That definition for me always worked, but I always made it very clear with the squires and men at arms, that's what we were doing. And the idea was that while they were a man at arms, if at some point they decided that they wanted to change the arrangement or move away from this arrangement, they could do it. But once they took the oath to be a squire, then they were on a path to eventually becoming a member of the chivalry. And whether it meant, through me or through someone else, they were making the commitment to pursue this. But that was just how we did it, and it worked well. It seemed like it worked pretty well. But I got that from watching several other knights and the arrangements that they had with their squires and men at arms, and thought it was a good way to do it. So, but I would say not everybody defines it the same way. So I think that gets back to know what you're getting into, and as a knight, know what you're asking for.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and as should be no surprise, I do it similarly. And for me, that period of a man at arms is, making sure that we're a good fit for each other and for our respective households. And the expectations that I have of a man at arms are exactly the same as they are as a squire. Because I don't want to do a bait and switch and say coddle you a little bit and as a man at arms, and then when you get to become a squire, expect all these other things of you. It's like I take you in this period as a man at arms, so that you know what you're getting into, and you know what I expect of you, and it is exactly what I expect of my squires. And as to Brion's point, if this is not for you, if I am not the person to take you on this path, let me find for you the person that is a better fit for you, right? And that's the whole point of it. The man at arms thing to me is like, at any point we can call this off, my fault, your fault, nobody's fault, and walk away clean. And I'm happy to find for them the person that is a good fit for them, because I have a very direct training methodology. I've as I kind of got from Brion, I got a little bit of the foot in the ass training methodology, and it's not for everybody,
right.
And I know that. And of course, I'll teach anybody how to fight, but being my squire is a totally different thing. There are greater expectations when you have that relationship, and I want you to know what you're getting into. And if it's not for you, then you can move on. And in the all the squires that I've had one man at arms that where we severed that relationship. He got knighted later. He's still a very good friend of mine. I have two other squires that kind of stopped playing. But all the other squires that I've had have been knighted or still currently my squires.
All right, so let's. I want to shift topics a little bit. And so I think we've there's, because again, as we talked about last episode, there's this whole knight squire idea is it's so singular and but it's so integral to becoming, right, whether you are a squire or not, sort of that learning is still there. But I want to touch on something that we had a question come up, and as a pair of knights with and I'm going to say this and make you both cringe, a combined 70+ years of experience being knights. Go ahead and yeah. Go ahead and count that.
Really? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess.
70+ years. I didn't do the exact math, but I know it's over 70. So you're welcome for that. So when you're going to vigils for new knights, what are your go-to pieces of wisdom to prepare them? This is from His Lordship Thorin. So what are those like? What's those nuggets? What are those day one or in this case day zero in a vigil? What wisdom do you impart? Well, Shawn, you want to take that first?
No, go ahead, Brian.
So I'll share my generic piece of advice that I give at every vigil that I go to, and I think it's important because I joined the SCA when I was 17 years old, and started to play when I was 18, and really got into it then, and I was knighted when I was 20 years old. So in a very brief time frame, all those wonderful things that you get along the way of experiences, they were done. That was it. And you're moving into this next phase of your life within the SCA. The one thing I tell every single knight to do as part of the vigil is I say, take the time to really, really experience this thing that you're going to go through, because it only happens once.
Right.
It is one time that you kneel before your king and have that sword placed on your shoulders. Doesn't happen again. Not the same way. So, and I think for a lot of people, it is an epic part of their journey within the SCA. It's a very, very special thing. It's something for all of us that we will never forget. But in a lifetime, it is something that you've got to take that all in and enjoy it, because now you're on to this next phase of the journey, and that doesn't come back. So it comes back when you get to watch people you're mentoring get knighted, but it's not the same. It's different. So I tell every person that I go to a vigil, take the time to really just take in this moment, take in everything that's happening to you right now, because you got to carry this thing forward for the next, if you're young, next 40, 50, 60 years. And if you're older,
or a combined 70 years or so.
but I do think that's an important aspect of it, because the SCA and the participation in the group, it lasts a long, long time. Long time. There's a whole lot of stuff that's going to happen between here and there and afterward that you got to kind of take into account. And I do remember an individual back in the day came up to me after I had been knighted and actually did ask me that question. It's like, you're only 20 years old. What are you going to do now? And it really was kind of one of those aha moments where I had to say, wow, what are you going to do for the next 50 years?
Yeah.
Because we are so many of us are so achievement conscious and achievement focused. You're working towards goals. You're working towards, movement and what you're trying to do to improve. So if you're that type of an individual, not everybody's like that, but a lot of people are. If you're that type of person, this can be really devastating for you when you hit that point. You realize, oh, you just got the prize. They said you're good enough to be a knight. Okay, so now what next? So back to the whole point of this session today. What next? What are you going to do? So you do have to kind of really, I think, take that all in. And I do think you have to kind of, and I'm going to tie this to one of the comments. Duke Christopher Houghton, I saw, is on here. Hey, Chris, how are you? It's good to see you, Your Grace, or hear from you, Your Grace. He asked a question about, what about when you're not able to fight anymore? And I think that's a real interesting item that, you could talk a long, long time about.
Yeah.
There are scenarios of just age and injury that do kick in over time. For those of you that I fought with over the years, the style that I developed involves a lot of sword blocking. I tend to use my sword more to block than anything else, and I've taken a lot of damage to my hands. Just some of the folks that I like to fight with, who some of them like to hit
really hard.
Trucks, which I loved it. The damage now to some of my joints that I've noticed at this point in my SCA career, it gets you wondering, okay, what's going to happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? How's that arthritis going to feel? And so there's a lot of that stuff that take those things into account as you're thinking about your career and your time in the SCA and what you're going to do.
Yeah, and I can tell you that as far as the longevity and the part of that what's next, the stuff that I'm doing with the coach's corner right now, I can assure you, 30 plus years ago, never crossed my mind.
Right.
I mean, I was, to some extent, I was happy to get the thing, right? I mean, it's like I made it. For me, the most immediate what next at that time was winning crown, honestly. And I know that seems kind of shallow, but look at my examples. Brion gets knighted, makes me a squire, wins crown. I'm like, oh, that's how we do this. Okay, I see how it's going on. It's it's kind of like when Dan Marino came into the NFL and he went to the Super Bowl in his first year, and he didn't win, and he's like, oh, okay, I see. You go to college, you go to the Super Bowl. That's how this works, and then never got back there again, right? But that's kind of what I got. It's like you get knighted, you take a squire, you win crown. So I mean, it was a pretty natural progression for me. It was always something that I kind of went. I was looking at, but then I went in the military, and that kind of derailed everything, right? But the idea of being a coach and a trainer the way that I've become over the years, that was never part of my plan. I just never saw that as a path in any respect. And so part of the what next is some of the immediate that you can look at it on the short term and the immediate, but you don't know where your path is going to take you. You don't know what kind of injury you're going to experience that is going to shut you down. That is going to, you can't do heavy combat anymore. What are you going to do with that? And I'll get to Thorin's question in a minute, but I think this kind of talks to the point that Chris was making. I have a member of our household, Master Reared Epgorston, who is a Grandmaster Archer. He's one of the best archers in the known world, and one of the best trainers. And he has a similar training methodology that I use, so he speaks my language. And he's taught me some. And archery is a thing that I have not put the kind of effort into doing archery, and it is not because I would not enjoy it. I guarantee you, I would love the hell out of that. It would be another aspect that I could venture into. I mean, being somewhat competitive individuals as we are, I could absolutely get into that. But the contributions that I'm making in heavy weapons combat right now, I think are more important to the society than me pursuing an archery thing. Because to Brion's point, I would have to put down a lot of what I'm doing in heavy weapons to pursue archery at the level that I would want to do. Right. I pursue my arts in specifically 14th century costuming right now, as time allows. It's something that, Brion taught me to sew. Knights sew. That's the deal.
Knights
right?
sew, that's right.
Right. And I don't know if Brion remembers saying it exactly that way, but that's the way I heard it. Knights sew. That's the deal. I'm like, okay, that's what we do then. And so I am pursuing my costuming arts, right? But it's something that I do as time allows. And if I wanted to make a surge, if I really wanted to make a push to do that sort of thing, I could get better at it. But I'm mixing that with the contributions that I'm making on the field, and I'm so much enjoying that part of it, and I'm giving so much back to the society right now that is still my focus, right? And I cannot tell you how blessed I consider myself to be to still be able to do this at this level and contribute at this level after 30 plus years of doing it. And I'm gonna keep doing this as long as that interest is there, and as long as I am effective helping that portion of it. And meanwhile, I'll dabble in these other things. And when it shuts down and when I can't do this anymore, I got a lot of things that I can still do that don't rely on being able to get hit with a stick. So
Knights. So
yeah.
What else do knights do? Knights dance?
Oh yeah, all of it. We had a whole episode on that too.
Yeah, I have to
we had the Courtly Graces episode.
Not all of them, but he tried.
Yeah. You know, I mean, we'd be out there in the field of Estrella, and Brion would look over across the field, and he'd say, "Blazing those arms."
Right.
And I do, you know, and you know, usually he asked me to do that because it was the king of something. You need to know how this works. Yeah, nice dance, nice do heraldry, nice do all this stuff. You know?
So, Brion, you mentioned something a minute ago or a little bit ago about the idea of being goal oriented, right? Very much. I'm very goal oriented. I hit that. And yeah, so I can see once you hit the accolade, like the oh crap, what do I do now, right? So I know a lot of knights and a lot of peers who went, okay, cool. I focused on fighting. I got all the PLQs. I do all the knightly things or the peer-like things. Like let's expand the conversation for a second. So it should be fairly easy to then take your fighting focus and pull back a little bit, and then shift into an art or do more service, or because you should have been doing all those things from the beginning, right? As a knight, as a pelican, as a laurel, you should be having a broad range of experience in the SCA. So it should be fairly easy to pull back for a little more one and force into another one. So what are your thoughts on that, as far as having that be a secondary goal of, okay, now I'm going to become a laurel, or now I'm going to become a pelican?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is a personal thing for the individual based on what their passions, once again, their passions. I overuse that term, but I think it's important because you become good at your passions. You become better and able to really, really extend yourself when you have something that is very meaningful to you. And if you love arts, if you love other things, then by all means go after those things and do them well. I think the biggest philosophy I've always felt is, and it's part of my motto that I've used in the SCA is, my motto is do your best and dare to dream. And the reason I have, and it's a two-parter, but the do your best part of it, I think, is a real important aspect of it. Don't be half-assed. Right. If you're going to do this, do it well, and do it as best as you can, and always seek to improve. And then dare to dream is shoot for the stars, go for it. You can do anything. I've seen fellows that when they started in the SCA and they were fighting and they were coming along, I would have just, if we're betting money, I'd say this is never going anywhere. And I've watched some of those folks become dukes and dukes multiple times over because they were willing to put the time in and they were willing to put the effort into becoming excellent. And that is what got them there. And I've been excited to see that kind of thing happen for multiple people from multiple backgrounds. So I think that you got to kind of pursue your passions. I'll give you my quick story. For me, I enjoyed multiple arts. So I became a little bit of a jack of all trades. I'd say, able to do many things, not as deep, but many things wide. And that worked because that was my area of interest and where I was at. Years later, after fighting and doing crowns and winning and, these things that kind of led to my history, I decided that as a knight, I wanted to learn how to ride, and I wanted to joust, and I wanted to pursue excellence with horses. And I spent, 15 to 20 years learning to train and work with horses. And it was a huge part of my life that I loved. I learned a lot from and extended beyond the SCA for me. But a lot of it came back to the origins were in the SCA and what we were doing within the SCA. So that was an extension. It was something I could do to pursue. And it fell very much in line with knightly qualities and things that I would envision that as a knight I should know how to do. So I think that's where it's at for you as an individual. Does it interest you? Are you willing to put the time into it? To Sean's point, you don't want to do something. Some things you do for fun, but that's not a pursuit. That's just doing something for fun. If you're going to pursue something, you've got to be excellent at it, or at least try. And that takes time. That takes a lot of time. We always talk about 10,000 hours. That's I'm a big believer in that. It's all these things require a lot of touches and a lot of time. So to give that time, you have to be able to allow your lifestyle to allow you to be able to do that. And I think that leads to a question that somebody had asked about, a lot of squires that are a lot of folks that achieve knighthood and then they just quit. And I don't hold those individuals in any less esteem because of the fact that they hit a point where they said, I'm done. Because for them, that maybe was their quest was that part of it, and they don't have anything more they want to pursue, and that's a choice. We hate to lose people. We hate to have people, achieve something and then not move on to these other levels. But that's just life. I mean, a lot of people have other things that are very, very real, and they want to put their time into it differently. So I think that's the other piece for you as a knight. You got to decide, okay, what do you want to put your time into, and do you have the time? Do you have the time? Do you have the energy? Can you get the motivation? And then find ways to get the motivation.
Right.
Because it's not always, roses and, all good things. I mean, the plateaus that we oftentimes talk about in athletics and fighting and all of these other things, it's the same thing in this as well. So you've got to figure out, okay, how do you break through? How do you get past that? And for some, it may be just time. You may just say, I don't have time anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I began costuming, as a squire, because this is a nightly thing to do, but a lot of the costuming that I'd done for a long time was what I refer to as SCA chic, 20-foot rule sort of stuff, or maybe 50-foot rule sort of stuff. It was Brian helped me make a pattern for a coterie when I was young, and I used that basic pattern, and had to expand it a few times as I grew. But I would get a pattern, and I would just make that, and it wasn't until I'd stepped down as a Baron of our local group in 2009 that I decided that I was going to pursue actual 14th century costuming. That was about the time that my wife said, she had started off doing Middle Eastern persona, and then one day she's like, "Man, I kind of like that coterie look," and I'm like, "I'm on it." let me get right on that, and I started doing that, and that has, fitting the 14th century kirtle, the Gothic fitted dress, has become my specialty, and certainly in my kingdom. And it's something I enjoy doing. I'm doing some of that this weekend, in fact. And but it wasn't. It was, just over 10 years ago that I decided that was something I was going to pursue, and I've been pursuing it somewhat seriously since then. And I've mentioned this in previous episodes. I've made no bones about saying that I want to be a Laurel. Most likely for 14th century interests, costuming history. And that will take as long as it takes.
Right.
And I'm perfectly content with, I love the art that I'm doing. And again, with the passion, if you love what you're doing, that may or may not be reflected in certain accolades. But at the very least, you get to enjoy doing what we're doing, right? And I get to contribute to, a society that has given me everything. I get to contribute in a way in which is not strictly related to the fighting field. And in an era of increasing, body image issues for some women, I get to create a dress and a pattern for a woman that makes her feel attractive, a dress that she feels good in. And I can't tell you that is a huge payoff for somebody to say, you made this pattern for me and I feel good in it. I feel like I look good in this dress. And that's something, you can't get that on the fighting field, right? And so, yeah, it's something that it's going to take me as long as it's going to take me, but I'm going to keep doing it. And I think a lot of the origins of that certainly started when I was a squire. But then, I remember having a conversation while I was a squire shortly thereafter. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was Brion's lady, Duchess Anna, who had asked me that question. What are you going to do if you can't fight? Or what is there for you besides fighting? If there was not fighting, what would you be doing? And it took me a long time to figure out what that would be, but it's certainly a valid question. And I got that question early on. I didn't have an answer for it at that time. It's taken me a long time to figure it out, but there's so many things that you could be doing. And it is, as Brion said, you follow your passion, you follow those things that are of interest to you. And, I think we've talked about this on the show. You can make excuses to fight, or you can make excuses to not fight. Right.
Right.
You can make excuses to do archery. You can make excuses to do costuming, or you can make excuses to not to. And if that excuse is that you're too busy fighting and you're trying to be a better fighter, that's a choice that you're making. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't be sitting around going, how come I haven't got my laurel yet, when you're still trying to win crown?
Right.
You got to make choices and follow your passion.
Yeah, I think well said. It's really interesting that you look at that of the idea of you have sewed and you've had these interests for all these years and are just now sort of on the laurel path now, right? Because previously you were on the knight path and you did that, and then you were on the squires becoming knights path, right? That was your path you were on. Thorfinn said the idea that you don't become a knight. You don't become a knight when you get the accolades. It's the starting point on your quest, right? I think it's really interesting. I think, and Brion sort of alluded to this early on, that the idea of you're always earning that, right? You're always sort of earning that, and then part of passing it on. I think that's. But at some point, you're like, okay, well, I've done that now. I've done that. I'm good at that. Sort of, I have a system. It works. We're doing that, and you finally find that time, especially as you have less work going on or less mundane things. You're like, okay, now I've got a little more time I can put into this. So yeah, I think that's a
And Brion kind of alluded to it too. For as much as he and I have been given by the society, there is a little bit of survivor's guilt, I think, where you're like, I got all of this. I got to give some of this back.
Right.
And the passion of being able to take a skill set, whatever your skill set may be, and being able to give that back is far more satisfying than any success I can have for myself at this point. And it goes to Brion's earlier point about passing on that legacy and keeping this whole thing going and making it better.
Mm-hmm. There you go. All right, I'm gonna. I think we've covered everything. Shawn, you have anything else you want to cover? Then I want to do a little business, and then I have a special request we're going to end the show with.
All right. I think we covered a bit. I'll let you do your business, and then we'll have Brion wrap up. How about that? And then we'll do some final thoughts.
There you go. All right. So,
Brion, was there anything else you wanted to cover?
On topic?
Anything specific for me?
Yeah. Did you have anything else that you wanted to cover that we haven't gone over?
Yeah, no, I was looking at some of the comments, just seeing if we kind of got to everything and where people were at. I think we pretty much got through it. But I would say, just in general, I think the wonderful thing about this group is you get to be a knight. And to me, a lot of people ask me, what got you into the SCA? It was because I wanted to be a knight. I mean, when I was a little kid, we didn't play cowboys and Indians. We played knights. And so for me, the ability to have something that allowed me to actually live that, grow through that, and show that and be that was and still is something that is very special to me. So I think that for all of you that are seeking that, or those that have achieved that, it's a pretty special thing that only a handful of us in this world get to actually partake of. And I guess my advice would be make sure you're taking full advantage of that and sharing it, because it's a pretty special thing.
There you go. Well said. I like that. The idea of being a knight, that is just it is the coolest pursuit, I think. Like all of our peerages in the SE are amazing with the idea of being a knight. That's the one that I think rings truest with most folks. So yeah,
like we mentioned in a previous episode, like you can ask a third grader what a knight is, and they have a very clear image of what that is. Right. You ask a third grader what a laurel is, and they have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
And
they might know it's a tree. That's about it.
Yeah, and I have a huge amount of respect for the Order of the Laurel, obviously, and it's something that I aspire to as well. But that image of knighthood is something that like everybody knows what that is.
Sure. All right, let's do a little business here. All right, so for those watching Kal-bardr's Corner, we have a couple things coming up for you. Next week, Coffee with Kal, I'll be joined by Lash Kinsey, or Master Lash, from out in the West Kingdom, for talking about fringies. Fringies is a Western idea that I was unfamiliar with until actually the pandemic. So
the term fringy is an SCA wide concept.
Yeah, and so in looking around, like I went, oh, okay, yeah, we have those here, but we never called them that. I never heard of it as a phrase. So I'm really looking forward to talking to him. I've talked to Lash a couple of times now, because coming up on the 18th, we'll be starting our new series with him called Fantastic Fringies and Where to Find Them. So a lot of the interview shows in the SCA right now are very pure and royal focused. None of them are focusing on the everyman. And Lash brought this idea to Logan and I and said, hey, man, I want to do this. I want to bring some of these unsung heroes out into the limelight. And I'm like, heck yes, let's do that. So we're doing very much a Steve Irwin style exploration of some of these fringies. And
Lash is uniquely qualified to do that, I think.
Uniquely qualified is a good way to describe it. I think that's
he's a good guy. We've got a good history. I think he's the perfect guy to do that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm super looking forward to both the conversation with him on the coffee show and also just that series in general. And that's going to run probably once a month. We might get it twice a month. Just depends on time. So look for those coming up. And of course, so this being our last episode, I was like, man, what am I going to do about Sunday nights now? Well, turns out, folks, we have something for you. So this came up in our last episode. Some of the questions about, well, what else is behind the night? What helps the night go? And all knights have consorts, and all kings have consorts, and these are important things. So I'll be joined by Duchess Nisa to talk about what is a consort on our new show, Consort Conversations. So this is going to be a series on the idea of being a consort, what it is, how you do it, how to pick one, how to both fight and be a consort at the same time. So it'll be a series very similar to what we're doing here, where we'll have a guest or two on to talk about a topic, and we're going to do the same schedule every 2 weeks. So I'm just trading out Shawn for Shawn's better half, frankly. I'm getting the
delighted.
I'm getting to get into that deal as far as I'm
concerned. Baby, I saved a time slot for you.
There you go. So make sure you subscribe down below. Click all the buttons on the YouTubes, or I like how Marie does the thing like that one. Oh God, I love it. Okay.
Of course, I always love Marie having to say Marie's name in the silent heraldry. Doing the she's talking. They're talking about me again.
Okay. And last but not least, if you want to support Kal-bardr's Corner, everything we do here, both on this channel and KK Productions as a whole, look us up on Patreon, patreon.com/KK Productions, or you can go out to Redbubble and search KK Productions, and we have stickers. And so recently, there was one of the complaints we had about stickers; they were all too small. I upgraded all the stickers so that all of them are up to dinner plate sized. and there may or may not be a comforter with our show's catchphrase on it. So if you want to do
nightly things
in bed, you can do that.
Do nightly things in bed.
And I'm sorry, Your Grace, Brian. It's his fault. Just there you go. All right, so that's all of that. All right, so to wrap up the show, we usually do a final thought, but I actually have a special request. Brian, do you have a story about Shawn as a squire that you can share with us? I think there's no better way to end the series than that.
A story?
We've got a few minutes.
Yeah, I will share with you probably the one that cracks me up the most. So Duke Shawn, when he was a young lad of very, very young age at the time, and we decided, hey, let's get him fighting. And it was, back in those days, you could get going a little bit earlier. So Shawn was quite the skinny individual. I would say Chicken Legs was probably made up after him. So
that would be a generous description.
And so we built Shawn. I built Shawn some armor that was it was steel, and it was amazing.
I started off in full plate.
Yeah, so his very first fighting was full plate. But the plate was directly against these very, very skinny legs, and a very wonderful mentor of mine, the lady to Sir Robert Dispenser, Mistress Leah Dispenser, who is also a knight, fought, and at one tournament when she and Shawn were fighting, she hit Shawn in the leg, and from across the field. We hear, "Oh!" and put your word, and he goes to his knees, and then she hits him again. It's like, "Ah!" and other things that we probably can't put out here on YouTube.
Oh no! I screamed out, "Oh fuck!"
Warning: offensive language. So. This is going on, and this is very loud, very, very loud.
Mind you, this was a month after I had fought at Estrella for the first time. Right. I've been fighting for a month, and let's also. Sorry, Brian. I'm going to throw in here also the fact that as we were building my plate legs, we had the intention of just adding extra limbs as I grew. Well, I grew like 6 inches from when we first made the legs. And so I had a gap from the middle of my thigh to the top of my hip. Right. So I have this giant gap in my armor, and Leah blasts me in the leg. I'm like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. So after the fight was over, Mistress Leah comes over to me and he's like, "Sir Brian, I need to talk to you about your squire. You really need to talk to him about his language on the field." To this day, just kills me.
It gets better. So Brian calls me over after that fight, and he says, "Okay, look, you can't say fuck when you get hit." I'm like, okay. I mean, I guess I probably shouldn't. I'm like, okay, all right, sure, no problem. So second fight, I'll go out and fight. I don't remember who it was. I get hit in the same spot. Ah, shit. So I'm out of the list. Brian comes to me after the second fight, and he says, "You can't say shit either." And certainly not that loud.
Start a list on the back of your shield. Words I can't say on the field.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was. I mean, I fought at Estrella.
You need to perspective on the whole thing, because Shawn, correct me if I'm wrong, but at that point in time, you were 13 or 14.
I was 14. So I fought at Estrella 1 in 1985. That was the first time I fought. I was 14 years old, and this was the Baronial Defenders tourney a month later.
Yeah. So
and it was and which I think was a week before Brian won crown.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we had Estrella, we had our Baronial Defenders training, and then Brian went Crown Red. Because you weren't Crown Prince right then, but yeah, it was like
Really after that,
like so. Yeah, I've been fighting for a month at this point, and there was a whole string of things that happened. I mean, because I was only squired for 2.5 years, and one of my favorites though is when I was Brian was giving me a ride home after practice, and I said, Brian, did you ever have one of those days where you just thought you just never make it and you just never be good enough? And Brian said, "What the hell are you talking about? You've been fighting for 3 months. You're supposed to suck at this right now." But it was like early on, I was like, Brian's really good. I should be really good. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, this is not your atypical. I actually think this was probably much more like a real squire relationship in the Middle Ages for the age that Shawn was at the time all this stuff was going on. Because
my timeline as a squire, as a page, a squire, and a knight was actually very close to what it was in the Middle Ages.
But you would be dead by now, or traditionally, so you at least got past that point.
Yeah.
All right.
And then, of course, there's many a Penzix story, but we won't get into those right now.
So yeah,
has the statute of limitations run out on any of that yet?
Yeah, let's. I don't have enough content warnings for those. Let's say that. All right. Well, thank you for that, Your Grace. I thought that was no appropriate way to end. Let's hear a good Shawn story. There you go. All right. Well, Shawn, you have a final thought for us, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, I wanted to, as far as the topic, what's next. I don't know that there's necessarily an answer, but it's something that I think unbelted fighters should consider as they are approaching the accolade. And you generally kind of know when you're getting kind of close. But it's something you should think about, because once it's or as knights, I think is something that we should prepare people better for. Because we put so much time and effort into achieving the one thing, and that's the big milestone that we have. And then, we get that, and we haven't really looked beyond that to any extent. And if you don't, you could get lost fast, and you could easily lose your passion for the society as a whole after that. So it's something I think we should prepare for. Otherwise, Kal, I have to extend my deepest gratitude to you, KK Productions, everybody involved, Marie as well, for doing the Silent Herald for us for all these episodes. When I first talked to Kal about doing an interview, we started talking about what I might like to say, and I realized that there was I got a lot to say. I have been blessed to be joined by some just really fantastic guests over this entire series. So my hats off and greatest thanks to each of them for providing their perspective. My thanks to the viewers of this series over time. And both students and mentors of mine who have contributed in the comments and asked the questions. It has just been a really great experience. I think it is provided a benefit to the society. And again, I can think of no better way to wrap this up by saying thank you once again to Brion for taking that leap of faith and believing in me when there was certainly no evidence at the time that maybe you should. You took a big risk and you took a big chance, and I'd like to think that it paid off for you. But my eternal thanks for everything over the years, and most certainly for joining us for the final episode and wrapping this up. It's been a real honor. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it very much.
There you go. You took the words out of my mouth, Shawn. Thank you all for watching out there. I'm looking forward to the new shows, and I hate we're ending this one, but I think we're ending on a good note. Again, thank you to Marie. She has been just a trooper through all of this, even through COVID shots and us talking bad about her or talking good about her to herself, and just making her life harder. But it's been fun. And of course, thank you, Your Grace, Brian, for doing this. I say this every week, but Shawn talks so great about all these guests, and you have delivered yet again. So thank you for that. All right. Thank you all for watching. This has been Marie, Brian, Shawn, and Kal in Kal-bardr's Corner. Night, everybody.
All right, good night, everybody.